Well, this is Memorial Day weekend, and so I guess it's quite fitting that our gospel reading for today is all about a soldier. Now, this, of course, is a coincidence. Many of you know that our readings each Sunday come from the Revised Common Lectionary, which most Christian churches around the world follow. And so these weekly readings are set years in advance, and they follow the church's liturgical calendar. But that said, I love that here we are on Memorial Sunday, and our passage is about the great faith of a soldier. Now, the soldier in today's gospel is a centurion. He was a captain in the Roman army, and he would have been an enemy to the Jewish people of Jesus' day. The Jewish people certainly did not look kindly upon the army of men that was occupying their land and oppressing them. But they would have also considered these men to be unclean. Now, I don't mean physically unclean, because certainly these men looked all shiny in their plumed helmets and their shiny breastplates. They thought that these men were morally unclean because they did not follow the Jewish laws. Now, these Jewish laws came from their scripture, from the Torah. And most of these cleanliness laws or purity codes came from the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus was written in 1400 BC. That's 1,400 years before Jesus was born. But they were still following these laws. These laws were things like, don't eat pork, don't eat shellfish, don't eat grapes that have fallen on the ground, and don't wear clothing of mixed fabric. These things were said in the scripture to be abomination. Now, the word that's used, the Hebrew word, is tova. And tova actually means unclean. So anything that was an abomination was something they considered unclean. Now, among those 76 abominations that are mentioned, there is a line that says, "And a man should not lie down with a man as he does with a woman." Now, that was written in 1400 BC. But there are still many Christians in 2016 who still point to that statement. Now, those Christians today are okay with eating pork, and they're okay with eating shellfish, and they're okay with wearing polyester. But for some reason, they still have that one that they say is still the one to follow. And it is too sad to say that they don't understand the line in the context and the culture in which it was written. Jesus lived at a time where the Jewish people were following things that were written 1400 years before them. And back then, people understood that men were the givers of life, not women. Women were considered second-class people. They were considered property of men. A woman's body was merely a receptacle to hold the life. But the man's seed was what they believed was the giver of life. So, to waste that seed was considered an abomination. That's what the line from Leviticus means. It has nothing to do with a man loving another man. Now, why do I mention this today? Well, because today's gospel from Luke 7, it's also mentioned in Mark chapter 8, is the one for us to use when we're faced with those Leviticus Christians. And if I don't preach this message today, they're going to take away my gay pastor's card. The soldier is coming to Jesus to seek help for one of his men who is dying. Now, a centurion, just by the word centurion, you know it means 100. A centurion had 100 men. And certainly in an army, death and dying was commonplace. So why would this centurion take a great risk and go out of his way to ask a Jew, his enemy, for help? There was something special about this one man that he cared for. The word that is used in the scripture is the word pais. P-A-I-S. Pais. It's not only used in Matthew and Luke's gospel, it's a Greek word that is used by Plato and Plutarch. And what pais means is male lover. So, the centurion in today's gospel is a gay soldier. It's true. Look it up. Google pais. Google gay centurion. No, wait, don't do that. Because you'll probably get a lot of not safe for work images. I'm sure many of you know that Greek and Roman soldiers at Jesus' time had relationships with men. Jesus, obviously living at that time, knew that. So what did Jesus have to say about this? Well, I really like what former President Jimmy Carter said recently. You know, Jimmy Carter is a Southern Baptist Sunday school teacher. And this is what he said. He said, homosexuality was well known in the ancient world well before Jesus was born. Of course Jesus knew about it. But he never said a word about it, ever. In all of his teachings about multiple things, Jesus never said anything about gay people being unclean. If it was such an abomination, why wouldn't Jesus mention it? This story would have been the perfect opportunity for Jesus to mention it. He could have said to the centurion, like he said to the adulterous woman, don't sin again. But he doesn't. What does he say? He says, I am so amazed. I have never seen a person who has this much faith as this gay soldier. And he turns to the people who are surrounding him, and Jesus says, all of you, the so-called faithful, you don't have the faith this guy has. I'm upholding this guy as the greatest example of faith that I, Jesus, have ever seen. Wow. Now, the front cover of our bulletin says, the faith of an outsider. That's what this story is about. There are many Christians today who fear the outsider. The outsider is anyone who thinks or believes differently than they do. They're all about the inner circle. Jesus was not about the inner circle. Jesus hung around purposely with the people who were considered unclean. During Jesus' time, if you were a good devout Jew, you didn't associate with Gentiles. You would not eat food that a Gentile prepared. You would not let a Gentile step foot inside your home. You would not touch them. But what did Jesus do? All of those so-called unclean people, Jesus ate meals with them. He touches them. He hangs out at their house. Jesus is trying to make a point to the religious people of his day, saying, you're all about clean and unclean. I'm not. What I care about is the strength of your faith, the power of your belief. You may say you're faithful, but do you really have faith? This outsider, this gay centurion, does. Now, what was so great about this soldier's faith? Well, first of all, we see that we hear in this gospel story that he helped build the synagogue for the Jewish people in Capernaum. They were the enemy. It's pretty amazing. Now, of course, we know that when American soldiers go to occupy a foreign land, the purpose is to help them build things. That doesn't always happen, but that is the purpose. And it's wonderful that this centurion, who was an occupier, helped them build their place of worship, which wasn't his place of worship. So we know he saw oneness, not division. But notice in this story, the centurion and Jesus never meet. Ever. They communicate to one another solely by messenger. The centurion knows that he doesn't need to connect with Jesus in order for the healing to happen. And he says, I myself being in the army, I receive orders and I give orders. I say to one of my men, go do this, and he does it. And I trust it's going to be done. So I know you, Jesus, you're going to follow that. You're going to say to your Father, let the healing happen, and it's going to happen. I don't need to be there. I don't need to see it. I just know. That's what faith is. It's putting your trust in that. How many of us here, when we needed healing for a person or a situation in our lives, asked Jesus for help, but then didn't really believe that healing was going to take place? I've given you the example before about calling up a company to order something over the phone. When I call a company on a Monday to buy a pair of shoes and I place my order, I don't call them again on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, making sure that they got my order. But how many people here pray to God for healing on a Monday, then you pray again on Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Thursday for that same thing? You don't think God heard you on Monday? That's what Jesus is saying, is that this man knew that he spoke, and he knew that healing would take place. He didn't even need to be there. And then look what else happened in the story. Jesus didn't need to be at the bedside of this ill man. Jesus didn't need to put his hands on the ill man. Jesus is miles away from that ill man. Notice in the gospel, every single time somebody is healed, every single time, Jesus never takes credit for it. He always says to the healed person, your faith has made you well. Your belief has made you whole. You do the healing. In Mark's version of this gospel story, Jesus communicates to the centurion this line, which is one of my favorites of Jesus. He says, it is done to you as you believe. It is done to you as you believe. So, if you don't believe in healing, probably not going to happen to you, because it's done for you as you believe. If you believe in lack and limitation, then that's what's going to be done for you. If you live in fear and worry, that's your belief, then that's what's going to be done for you. If you believe the world is a scary place, then that's what's going to be done for you. That's what that line means. It is done to you as you believe. So Scripture says, be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. When you start changing your beliefs, your life will change. That's what Jesus is trying to get across to the people. It doesn't matter about all of these rules that you follow that say, oh, look, I'm a clean person. I am so faithful. Jesus is saying, are you really faithful? Because if you were really faithful, you would believe. Like this man believes. That's what Jesus is trying to get across in today's gospel message. Now you may say, Pastor Sal, it is hard for me to change my thoughts. It's hard for me to see abundance and prosperity when I look around and all I see is lack and limitation. And it's hard for me to change my thinking about peace and love because I look around the world and all I see is hate and discord. And it's hard for me to believe in healing because I look around me and all I see is sickness and illness. Well, look, in this story, the centurion didn't need to see in order to believe. You don't need to see in order to believe. It is why Jesus said, blessed are those who believe without seeing. We want to see the results before we believe. And Jesus is saying faith is about hope in what is unseen. So we are in the season of Pentecost. And in this season we are connecting with the Spirit. And so what I would like to invite you to do is to examine your faith. Are you a person that needs to see things before you believe? Or are you a person of hope and trust, knowing that the universe is always working in your favor, that your greatest good is on its way? Jesus was trying to communicate to us, all the things that I have done, you can do. And then he added, these things and greater. So what Jesus is trying to say is you have the power to heal your life. You do. Do you believe that? If you do, you're a person of faith. If you don't, you may be in the inner Christian circle and you may follow all the rules and have a cross hanging up at your house and have all these Bible quotes written on your wall. But then if you live in worry and fear and lack and limitation, you're not a person of faith. That's what Jesus is trying to say. So let us recommit ourselves as people of faith to really be faithful people. Let us believe without seeing. Let us walk by faith and not by sight. Namaste.